we were talking about this concern over what happened yesterday morning, what appears to be a coordinated attack on some of the French infrastructure. Security specialist Will Geddes is here. Morning, Will.
Morning.
The fingers of blame are being pointed, but in numerous directions.
Yes, of course.
Vague far-left accusations, whatever that means.
Yeah, well, the sort of vague far-left accusations are probably a little bit more mute than, say, blaming or putting the blame at the door of Russia, which I think is probably more likely to be the candidate behind it. I mean, you have to really break it down. In terms of the actual attacks themselves on these various different transportation hubs, they were pretty low level, and they're low key. They were fires, they were arson. Now, one might say, yes, that's pretty easy to organise and very easy to implement. However, to plan it is an entirely different thing. It's a question of where those fires would be placed, where would they be undertaken, and that takes a considerable amount of planning to think, okay, if we want to disrupt the infrastructure to a country, how are we going to do it? And I've been involved in these kinds of operations before in the planning of them. And you look at what can you do to disrupt and embarrass a nation? And that's really would be the objective. And the key thing is to look at these things and go, what is the motivation behind it? Why would someone do this?
Well,
what is
you
the
answer
motivation?
it. Yes.
So, well, it would be to embarrass the nation. It would be to show that, obviously...
But why?
Well, to be honest, Russia is in a very precarious position right now with this whole encroachment of NATO, the whole Ukraine situation, the presidential elections right now. There are lots of things that certainly would assist Russia in unstabling or destabling certain countries in terms of their capability, their resilience, their robustness in terms of their security. Now, everybody knows the eyes of the world are focused on France right now. This opening ceremony yesterday, which I think was incredibly brave to do on the Seine, the planning that goes behind that, I certainly wouldn't have wanted that
Almost
job.
impossible to police, I would have thought.
Oh, virtually impossible, absolutely, and even then, with all the resources that you can throw at it, you've still got that margin of potential vulnerability. And they had an option to put it in the Place de Concorde as the alternate. Now, if they had stepped down from the Seine to Place de Concorde, they would have lost some face in the eyes of the world in terms of the security threats, because there were a few individuals that were arrested in advance of the games who had jihadist plots, obviously against the games. So to keep it in the Seine, they had to show resilience. So what is another way to potentially get at them? And that is to disrupt their infrastructure.
They did make arrests yesterday as well following these fires, didn't they?
Yeah.
So those people will be able to tell us something
Maybe.
about the derivation of their plot.
I was interested. You said maybe. Are you talking things like cutouts?
Well, there's all sorts of things that you can potentially do. I mean, there was one individual that was actually arrested prior or just in the immediate wake of these attacks who was connected to FSB, which is the domestic intelligence agencies for Russia. Now, he seems to have disappeared a little bit. Now, you've got to bear in mind as a nation, they're going to want to be very careful about what they actually put out in the public domain. So I would say we're probably never going to get the true answer necessarily to who was behind this. And it is convenient, and I'm not a conspiracy theorist by any stretch, but it's convenient to place the door of responsibility as, say, a far-left group.
Right. What strikes me, if it was Russia, I mean, whether you'd class it as a terrorist
No,
act,
I wouldn't, yeah.
Well, no, but within that scheme of things,
yeah.
You could still sort of say, couldn't you, well, it would be, whoever did it is acting as, if it was a nation state,
yes,
they're acting as a sort of terrorist nation state, aren't they? Sending people
disruptor,
out to...
yes. It's a disruptor. I mean,
but it's a bit of a fine line.
It is a fine line, because terrorism has changed in its sort of interpretation, as we've seen, certainly over the last sort of 10 years, where we've looked very much at sort of very visceral acts. And most terrorism, as it's usually sort of perceived these days, will involve harm to human life, whether that be casualties or fatalities. In this instance, this is a much more clever operation in terms of, let's just embarrass the nation that is going to be under the world's focus right now.
Yeah. Oh, I don't know,
it's so mean-spirited, isn't it?
It is.
Because the whole notion of the Olympics is about, peace, love and harmony, and of course sport.
Yes.
And suddenly you get these, as you call them, disruptors.
Yeah.
And
saboteurs.
Saboteurs. Yeah.
I mean, the one thing I think we've just got to be cautious for, and I don't want to be the harbinger of doom, but I think it's early days. We've got about a month of games ahead of us. Most of these are focused into the centre of Paris. The problem is that there are these zones which are set up, which is fine, which is great, and you can secure those pretty well. It's much like doing the opening ceremony in a stadia. And I've been involved in 3 Olympics in the past and involved in security aspects. when we look at, obviously, the individuals that are coming into Paris, you've got the feral criminals, which we know are high in existence in Paris, and they will be the bees to the honey. And it's going to be the poor spectators who will be turning up, and their hotels may not be within those zones. They have to get to those zones. So the analogy I've been using recently is a bit like when I was in Baghdad, is trying to get into the green zone. You're almost running to the safe zone.
Yeah.
So it's going to be a mixture of old-fashioned policing and intelligence.
Technology, they're throwing everything at it. And there are 40 different participant nations who are also bringing all their capability to bear. I mean, even us in the United Kingdom, everybody will be contributing to try and help Paris have a safe games. And because we've got our own participants, our own athletes, obviously, taking part.
I find it all too exciting, but I think I'm reading too many Tom Clancy's at the moment, Will. I think that's the problem.
Well, I don't know. Sadly, the fiction and the fact is beginning to blur somewhat, isn't it?
Don't tell me that. I'm back. I'm redoing all the Tom Clancy's. I've done them already.
I like Tom Clancy as well.
I know, but it's all just...
Who doesn't like Tom Clancy?
Yeah.
I mean, they're just amazing, aren't they?
Clever man.
It does all, as you say, it seems a bit too realistic. You listen to a lot of it. Thank you very much indeed, Will.
Pleasure.
Good to see you.